The following is a sponsored program paid for by First Alliance Credit Union. Welcome to Good Money Moves, featuring Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union and Andy Brownell. Here's Andy Brownell on Rochester's News Talk, 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
It's once again time for Good Money Moves. I'm Andy Brownell with Jenna Taubel, Director of Brand and Digital Member Experience with First Alliance Credit Union. Hi, Jenna.
Hey, Andy.
Last week, we talked about some common Black Friday traps and, of course, how to avoid them. What's the Good Money Moves topic for this week?
Yes, well, we are definitely getting into the winter holiday season. And while the winter holidays are supposed to be about relaxation and hanging out with friends and family, we all know that holidays are actually just really stressful. And a big reason for that is, of course, because they're expensive.
Yes.
It costs money to have fun, doesn't it?
Oh.
And according to one study, another conversation, Andy.
Exactly.
And when I say expensive, I do mean expensive. And should not shock anybody, this number. So there is a study done by recently, and American shoppers spend an average of $1,455 during the 2022 holiday shopping season. And that number is most definitely going to increase this year, given how much inflation there's been. And $1,500, that's what we're looking at.
Oh,
like,
yeah, I guess I better adjust my budget.
Yeah. Well, the good news is, though, there's a way to help you not just keep your holiday costs under control, but there's a way to help you figure out how to cover all of that holiday spending without going into debt. That's what we're talking about today.
So I imagine the key tool we're talking about is the budget, right? We're talking about using the budget.
Well, yes, close. What I'm talking about, though, is actually it's similar but different, and it is something called a holiday spending plan. And you're like, I know what you're thinking, Jenna. Spending plan, budget, same thing, right? No, in this case,
some little
no.
holiday decorations and put it on my budget.
So a holiday spending plan is definitely similar to a monthly budget, but you're not balancing your income against your expenses in this case. So instead, you're listing out all of your winter holiday related expenses, totaling them up so you know how much you're planning to spend on the holidays before you've spent it.
All right.
So the nice thing about this type of quote unquote budgeting is that you can create them for pretty much any type of situation, actually. And we've talked about some of these in previous episodes, right? You can create a spending plan for vacations, for weddings, for back to school shopping, right? Today's episode, though, we're going to be diving deep into some tips that our listeners can really use to get maximum benefit out of creating and using a holiday spending plan to keep their holiday costs under control.
In essence, it's a budget within a budget, right? So if I budgeted this much money for the holidays, this is the spending plan that breaks it down within that budget. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great way to explain it.
All right. What's the first tip for creating a holiday spending plan?
So the first and most important thing to do is create these spending categories that actually fit your life and how you normally spend on the holidays. Because if you don't, you're going to get nowhere really fast and feel really frustrated. So, there are when we talk budgeting, there's kind of a core set of budgeting categories, right? Your food, your mortgage, your insurance payments, those types of things. But for a holiday budget, you're going to track things in different categories, right? Holiday gifts, travel costs, decorations, special clothing you want to buy, food, of course, right? You got to buy and make a lot of food over the holidays, any events you plan to attend or charities you plan to donate to. All of those things kind of fall into this holiday spending plan that you're putting together. So you'll also want to kind of add and subtract categories to take into account, like your plans, right? Make it unique to you, right? If you don't travel for the holidays, you don't need a line item for travel, right? I mean, kind of common sense. But so if you are planning to travel for Christmas, let's say, you're going to definitely want to include expenses then like eating out or hotel stays as part of that holiday spending plan, because those are all costs that are going to contribute to you traveling. Now, if your family doesn't really celebrate Christmas and maybe you want to adapt your kind of spending plan to reflect more just family get-togethers and things like that. So also, if you won't really do a lot of decorating or events, but you still keep, want to keep those items related to food and travel, right? So it's kind of all about just what is it? How do I usually spend the holidays and what are the costs associated with that? List them out. Be very, I would go on the higher end of the expenses that you plan to put into those when you start to kind of put those dollar amounts into those categories.
In essence, it's well, I guess it's fully customizable.
It is. Yeah, there's no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong amount. There's no.
Yeah. And if you're hosting, you're going to add a whole lot more to your food budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So how do I know how much to put into each one of these categories?
Yeah, great question. So there's not really one good way to determine this, right? It's kind of like it depends, and it's really based on your priorities. But there are some kind of strategies you can use to help you get to the right numbers to help you really create this spending plan that's accurate to your actual life situation. So the first way is to simply start by giving it your best guess. This may or may not be super accurate, but it's a good way to just get started, especially if you've never gone through creating a holiday spending plan before. You shouldn't just like randomly pluck numbers out of the air. That's not what I'm saying. Just think about, your prior expenses. Like I know for a fact that I usually spend about $500 per immediate family member on gifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on the person, but right, that so you kind of you should have a general idea of how much you're spending. So start there. And then you can start to use kind of your previous year's spending as that guide for where those buckets end up. So thankfully, or not thankfully, I don't know, we live in a mostly cashless society at this point. So one of the advantages of that when it comes to planning your holiday spending plan is that you can go back and look at exactly where you spent that money last year. That means you can go through things like your bank statements, credit card statements to see how much you spent in these different places for these different spending plan categories. And you can use that information then to help you figure out how much you'll be spending this holiday season, because we are all creatures of habit. Your spending for the holidays is not going to be drastically different than it was the year before, unless you've made major differences in how you're planning to spend your holidays.
That's a great idea, though. Go back through your purchases, because that'll certainly jog your memory very quickly.
Mm-hmm. It will. Yeah. And if you're not finding something that you're feeling like you remember and it's not maybe showing up on one of your bank statements or credit card statements for some reason, you can always go straight to the online retailers that you shopped at, like Amazon, and look through some of the orders you've placed, things like that, if you're not quite sure. Or maybe you bought some stuff for the holidays and some stuff that you just always buy and you're not sure, well, how much was it? You can dig as deep as you want. But just the point being, get a good kind of estimate of where you're at. And then again, take some time to just research some of those expenses. So this is definitely the most time consuming way to get to the nuts and bolts of what should be in your spending plan. But you will definitely get the most accurate results if you dig this deep. So you want to figure out, ahead of time, what are you making for dinner? Start looking at prices on the ingredients for that thing. Start looking through those travel sites to get estimates on airline tickets, hotels, Uber, all of that stuff that you're going to need if you're traveling. Then determine, are you going to need gas? Are you going to be renting, driving a lot for the holidays? What is that going to cost you in extra gas outside of your normal spending? And again, any gifts you think you might be buying already, price them out. That's where, again, you can get super accurate with this if you have enough time. But you're probably going to end up essentially using kind of a combination of all of these steps to create your holiday spending plan, right? Again, just take some time to do some research on airline prices, maybe estimate how much you want to spend on gifts per person, and then maybe think about what costs to make dinner in the past, right? So you can get as nitty gritty and as planned out as you want, but I think just even having kind of that base level idea of what you're getting yourself into for the holidays from a financial standpoint, you are going to feel so much better about your holiday spending going forward because you kind of have this plan in place.
And I like the idea of the research too, because I know that if I go in my head and I just pluck that number out of my head, it's always going to be too low.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We'll get by. The kids only need $10 gifts. No problem.
Yeah.
No.
$500.
And somehow
later.
it doesn't work out that way.
No, never does.
All right. This is Good Money Moves. We're talking about a holiday spending plan as we head into the holidays to, I guess, prevent ourselves from getting out of control on the holiday season. Jenna Taubel with First Alliance Credit Union is with us. We'll return in a moment on News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Good Money Moves continues in moments with Andy Brownell and Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union. This is News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. We're talking Good Money Moves with Andy Brownell and Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union on Rochester's News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Welcome back to Good Money Moves. Jenna Taubel with First Alliance Credit Union. I'm Andy Brownell, and we're talking about a holiday spending plan. And I guess, when do I start, Jenna? Should I have started 6 months ago?
Well, probably. The earlier you can start planning for this, really, the more benefit you're going to get out of it. But that doesn't mean you still can't start today or even tomorrow. Having any kind of plan in place or even just knowing what you're getting yourself into is always a good step to take, even if it's not maybe giving yourself as much time as you'd like. But the sooner you can get started, the easier it is to kind of preemptively get ahead of the costs that are coming your way they're happening regardless. So the better you plan, the sooner you plan ahead, the better, right? So you can kind of start to spread out the cost of your holidays over more paychecks, essentially, the sooner you start, and ultimately kind of start to save more money for that holiday shopping season. Since you have more time to save if you start earlier, then you also don't have to rely on debts and loans to meet some of those holiday spending goals that you have. So it also gives you a chance to just kind of search for better prices on items, sales, discounts, all of that stuff, because you kind of know ahead of time what you're planning to use the money for, and it's not just like so random. We talked a lot about that last week when we talked about not falling into those Black Friday traps. It's kind of the same idea here. The sooner you start planning, the better off you're going to be and the better off your budget's going to be, because you can save more for it, or you can at least have planned ahead more for what you need if you do need to take on debt.
Okay, and all makes sense. I can also see by using these strategies, it would be useful for other, I guess, budgets within the budget, like vacation budgets, and thank goodness that's behind me, baby budgets. But,
at least for a couple years, right? You could be
grandchildren.
someday.
Yeah, that starts all over again. Okay. So moving on, what's your next tip?
Yeah, so the next thing to do is really figure out how to, again, fund your spending, right? I mean, the money's got to come from somewhere, whether you save it or whether you have to put it on a credit card and pay it off later. You're paying for it either way. So you got to figure out what is that amount that you're going to need. And we talked a little bit about how you can do that. But another way to kind of look at it is to set yourself a SMART goal once you know how much you're going to need, especially if you got started earlier in the year. And again, for those who have maybe not heard some of our other episodes where we talked about SMART goals, SMART is an acronym and it stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So you're creating essentially a savings goal that you're going to use to then fund your holiday spending. So once you've created that holiday spending plan, then you're going to know when you'll need money, right? How much you'll need. And if you've already have that kind of time bound and specific aspect of the goal created, wrapped up in there, And then you can even kind of have that realistic part of the goal created, since you probably do want to spend over the holidays. It's going to happen. So you need something. Really, all you need to figure out then in that next step is to figure out how much money you can set aside each month to then reach that holiday spending savings goal, and where exactly that money is going to come from in your regular budget, your regular monthly budget, right? So
Yeah.
the answer may not always be obvious at first, right? It's really hard to take a look at your budget and go, it's February and I'm going to start planning for December. That's kind of hard to think about sometimes. But it there's ways to kind of take a look at this and slice and dice it a little bit.
Yeah. And also, if you start it in February, or better yet, January, that amount that you're saving out of each paycheck or each month is going to be significantly smaller, rather than do what I did and wait until November.
Exactly.
And go, it's a lot. Yeah. The decisions on where to find that money would have been a lot easier if I had started in January.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I'm in the same boat, Andy. I've got 2 kids with birthdays in December. So my brain is always on get through the birthdays, then worry about Christmas, which leaves me like a week to figure out Christmas usually, but I'm trying to get better about it. But I mean, kind of going back to, if you're not really sure where this money is going to come from throughout the year to start saving money towards holiday spending, right? Again, some low-hanging fruit, right? You can kind of consider some of the more common ways to kind of cut costs in your monthly budget, right? Like make meals at home instead of eating out more, turn down the thermostat a degree or two, stop buying coffee at Starbucks on your way to work every day, or, those are just some of those really easy ones, but you can get creative with your budget once you start to really take a minute to look at it. It becomes pretty clear where you have some wiggle room in most cases. Of course, though, you might not have as much time to save as you like. I mean, we are talking about this in November. So in that case, you'll have to decide if you want to reduce costs in your budget or use a credit card to make up the difference between what you already have available to spend and what you are projecting that you're going to spend with this spending plan that you just put together. Now, it's not a terrible thing to use your credit card to fund your holiday expenses. Many, many, many Americans do this. However, if you do use your credit card, be aware of how you're using the card and make sure that you know what you'll spend it on and what you won't, and make sure you have a plan in place post-holidays to pay that off in a relatively quickly manner. You should not be still paying off last year's credit card debt from the holidays in November of this year, right? You should have that paid, 2 or 3 months tops to get that paid down.
Just look at what they're charging you for interest on the credit card if you want encouragement to pay it off quickly.
Yes. Yeah. If you are struggling to pay off credit card debt from last year's holiday season, you spent more than you can afford to spend. So that's one area to maybe stop and take a look at and reflect on moving ahead. If you do typically use credit cards to fund your holiday spending and it's not a rewards card, this could be a really good strategy for you as well, is to consider using a rewards credit card this year, because there's some cost savings, believe it or not, that can come from those if used appropriately. So like, for example, the First Alliance Credit Union You Choose Rewards credit card can allow you to kind of recoup some of your costs because you're able to accrue points for every purchase you make, and then you can use those points to take dollars off your payment that's owed. You can apply those. So you can kind of, I guess in a roundabout way, it's like a rebate, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
So if you do rely on credit cards, again, just make sure that you're using ones that are going to benefit you the most, have a lower rate, maybe have some rewards that you can either maybe get some of your holiday shopping done through redeeming points for things, or that you can use some kind of cash back to lower the total final balance that you owe, those type of things.
What you just mentioned is what I was going to bring up. If you really planned ahead and started this earlier in the year, and you were disciplined to use, for gas and groceries and pay it off every single month, you could just save up those points and have that be part of the way you pay for your holiday budget.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect.
That's a great way to use your points.
Okay. We have to take another break. Jenna Taubel with First Alliance Credit Union is with us for Good Money Moves. And we're talking about a spending plan for the holidays, a budget within a budget. Back in a moment on News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Good Money Moves continues in moments with Andy Brownell and Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union. This is News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM. We're talking Good Money Moves with Andy Brownell and Jenna Taubel from First Alliance Credit Union on Rochester's News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Good Money Moves. The topic this week is a holiday spending plan. I like my budget within a budget thing, but
yeah,
we'll see if that catches on. Probably not, but. All really important. I mean, this is a really important thing to cover because it's the one thing that can really throw a wrench into your meeting your financial goals. You could be doing good, really good all year long, but if you don't have this holiday spending plan, all that budgeting could get thrown out the window. And whatever gains you made could be erased if you don't have a way to get through this part of the year.
Exactly.
So, like I say, if you're not staying on track, you're not doing any good. So, any final pieces of advice for us, Jenna?
Yeah, so you make a really good point about keeping track, right? So that's really the next tip and kind of piece of advice that goes along with the conversation today. And that is, so you've taken time to create this holiday spending plan. Well, now you actually need to keep track of what you planned on spending versus what you actually spent, and to know if you're on track or not. And again, this spending plan, it will let you know how much you've planned to spend, but it won't automatically control that spending. That's still you. You still have to take control of that. So you are going to need to keep track of your spending to make sure you aren't spending more than you planned in any one area of this spending plan that you've created. And that's okay if you're not completely one-to-one, everything doesn't exactly match up. As long as that overall number that you anticipated is close, you'll be okay. But some things you can do to kind of make sure that you are staying on track can be things like using a separate credit card to track all of your holiday spending. Like there's one card you use, you put it all in there so you know exactly what's being spent and where you're at. You could use keep the funds that you're planning to use in a dedicated savings account or checking account at your financial institution. You can do things like start tracking purchases either by hand or in your budgeting app of choice. Most of them you can kind of designate and kind of keep track from there. Otherwise, I think, tracking, this is why it's important, because tracking your expenses doesn't just help you kind of stay in budget. It also helps you then to plan for next year, because you're able to tweak and get better and better at predicting the areas you spend more in, the areas you don't actually maybe even need, and where you may go, well, we spent a lot of money here, but I really have no desire to make 40 batches of cookies next year, so we don't need that much in groceries, right? So those are some things you can kind of help you plan ahead while you're spending this year.
Yeah, it's excellent. Especially, it's like any budget. It's constantly needing maintenance.
Yes.
And this is, if you do it this year, even starting late, going through the exercise of it will pay off big time next year.
Yes.
You'll have that much more knowledge to work with.
Yes.
Well, as usual, great information. And as usual, I'm sure there's a lot more out there as far as resources. If you're planning a holiday spending plan or working on one, Jenna, where can I find more information?
Yes, as always, I encourage our listeners to visit our website, firstalliancecu.com. You can subscribe to our blog. We release new financial tips and advice there every week. You can go back and listen to past episodes of this show at firstalliancecu.com/podcast or on krocnews.com. You can also subscribe to Good Money Moves on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts. And if you love our show, please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. If you have a financial topic or a question that you would like covered on Good Money Moves, please send me an email at marketing@firstalliancecu.com. And of course, I strongly encourage you to reach out to our team at First Alliance Credit Union. They're here to help you start making good money moves today.
That's First Alliance Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA and an equal housing lender. Jenna Taubel, thank you again, and we'll chat next week.
Absolutely.
This has been Good Money Moves right here on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.